Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To. On today's video, we will be revisiting our £600 gaming PC build, which all went a little bit wrong. Keep watching to find out more. Okay, so today's video we'll be taking a look at our £600 PC build, which was the gaming PC build made up of kind of new and used parts, which a lot of you guys actually enjoyed the video, so thanks for watching and thanks for commenting and all that kind of usual stuff. But sadly, the PC wasn't long to be on this planet. So the Spectrix B450 board actually died a death for some weird reason. The Ethernet port just stopped working altogether. Tried some BIOS flashes, all that kind of stuff. Long story short, it had to go back to the manufacturer. But that was really good because the timing was excellent. As some of you will probably know already and have possibly picked up as well, there was a fantastic deal which was on Amazon's warehouse. This was a clearance board, the B450 Aorus Elite from Gigabyte, and we managed to pick this up for an absolutely stellar price of just over £32. I think it was like £32.97 or something crazy like that. There were a few more boards available and some of you did pick them up, so those of you that did, well done, excellent choice. And for that reason, obviously, we've changed the pricing structure of the build altogether, and also we can pass that saving on to the end user or customer, whichever the case may be. So yeah, we've effectively saved, if you think the previous board was somewhere between £80 and £100, depending where you buy it from, for this coming in at like £33, then yeah, we've saved somewhere in the region of about £70, well, between 50 and 70. So that is a great saving and does put it into a slightly different price category. We can then also as well afford other certain luxuries. So one of the luxuries is we've upgraded the case. So now we're going to be using the IONZ Kessho, which is a slightly nicer looking case in my opinion. I don't know, let me know what you think in the comment section below. We did a full review of that, so if you want to check it out, you can do up here. And it's a really nice case. Again, you'll see it a little bit later on anyway. Also, it's given us the advantage we can now add some Wi-Fi to the board, which actually someone I've spoken to who potentially this is going to be going to, they did want Wi-Fi because their PC is going to be set up kind of miles away from where the router is. So yeah, we need a little bit of Wi-Fi. So we can easily incorporate that in the cost of the build without actually increasing the price to the customer, because we've saved a ton actually on the board itself. Now, other things we've kind of saved on, obviously processor-wise, processor we had anyway, but you can pick those up really cheaply from CEX. The 1700X, which we're using in this particular build, doesn't come with a cooler, so that is an extra expense. We've gone with the MT-4 from Snowman, so you can pick these up for around about £20 here and there. So when we add into our Wi-Fi card, which is the UBIT one, which we've also reviewed, which you can check out up here, we've basically come and broken even. So we've added some extra parts, some extra cooling, and we've come out almost the same price. I'll give you a total rundown of the price at the end of the build, just so you know what I've actually spent and you can see what it's kind of worth. Some of the prices obviously are going to change dramatically because, well, the time of year, where we are globally and all that kind of stuff. So I have picked up some of these things at particularly good prices. The GTX 1070 was a really good buy. At the time I thought it was a little bit expensive. We paid about $225 for that. But now if you look on places like CEX or eBay, that kind of thing, these cards are going for absolutely insane prices. $250, $275, $325 I've seen them for as well. So yeah, GPU prices are absolutely insane. So when we're looking at the prices towards the end, these are going to be the prices that I've actually paid, not what you can possibly pick them up for now. So there is a slight caveat there. So that essentially is the parts introduced. Again, if you've seen the previous video, you pretty much know what's going on. So we've got the Cylon 700 watt. We've also got the 1070, as we said. We've got the Snowman. We've also got the TCsunbow 1TB SSD. We've got the UBIT card, as we said, which has been added. We've got the Ryzen 7 1700X. We've got the motherboard, and we've got the XPG RAM, the Spectrix 32GB, which is a great deal, which I picked up on our Discord, actually, from one of our Discord members. So thank you very much for that, Marshmallow Cookie. Do appreciate that one. So I think that's the parts introduced. Let's get on and build this damn thing. So before we actually get into the build proper, we should really discuss why this board was so cheap. Now, I'm pretty sure the reason it was returned is possibly user error. There is another video which I did actually on this board itself and how we received it and kind of how to avoid making the same sort of mistakes. You can check that out up here as well. This board was ridiculously cheap, so we were taking a little bit of a punt on it. When I took it out of the box and looked at it originally, it looked absolutely fine. Essentially, it looks like it's been untouched. The only thing which I noticed originally was somebody had left their motherboard standoff attached to one of the mounting points, which, yeah, I guess can happen. On closer inspection, I did notice though that one of the SATA ports was absolutely annihilated, which possibly I'll try and add some B-roll of. I've actually remedied it now. What we've done is we've got some tweezers and actually just bent the prongs off. There didn't seem to be any damage to the port itself. We have actually got 6 ports on here, SATA ports, so realistically we only need 1. So yeah, we could have had more damage, it wouldn't have been a problem. So we've taken the pins off from this bottom connector, so now that's bare. It hasn't affected the performance of the board, that kind of thing. I have actually put this on a kind of stress test to make sure that it's all okay before I decided if I'm going to keep it or not. And actually it performs considerably better than the Strix board that it's replacing. So yeah, it's been great all round. But that is the one thing, obviously the SATA port being mangled isn't a great thing. All the other components inside the box that you expect to get, all the accessories, all that kind of stuff, was absolutely fine. There doesn't appear to be any other obvious damage to it, and some things like the peels, which were actually on some of the parts, were all in place. So yeah, overall it's been a fantastic board. But yeah, that SATA port was one of those things which I looked at initially and thought, oh my goodness, what am I going to do to actually try and remedy this? But actually it's worked out fine. So there we go. That is the reason why this board was so cheap, and that is the risks that you take. So anyway, let's get on and put this thing together. Okay, so let's start off with the build. So we've also got our processor. This is the Ryzen 1700, which we've had for donkeys, and you can pick these up for somewhere in the region of about 120, 130 pounds from CX here in the UK. So all we need to do is to lift up the retention arm, put it into the upright position, making note of the writing on the top here and also the cutout at the bottom, which is what gives you the right setting or the right spacing. And the processor is got a triangle in the bottom corner, and that goes into the bottom corner to match up with the other triangle. Just plop that into place, should fit in with no problems at all. And then when you're done, you can put the arm down on the side and lock it into place. So that's the processor installed. For the cooler we're using, the Snowman, we don't actually need to remove the AM4 mounting lugs because we actually use those, so that's something we don't have to do. So what we could do now is add a little bit of thermal paste. We're going to be using the Arctic MX4 as per usual. Really good paste and gets the job done, so let's go ahead and put some of that on. So when it comes to applying your thermal paste, again we're going to be using the MX4. You don't really need a great deal, just a tiny little bit, so slightly smaller than a grain of rice, and just in the middle there. There we go. It's probably a little bit too much, but a little bit much is fine. Too little can cause problems, so when that's squished out, that should cover up the entire die. So let's go ahead and install the cooler. So this is the MT-4 from Snowman. Nice little cooler, actually really easy to install, and on the bottom there you've got the heat pipes, etc. So yeah, does a pretty decent job. So we're going to go ahead and clamp this in. So this clamp here goes at the top, and the spring clamp here goes towards the bottom section, and obviously orientation wise the fan should be facing towards the front of the system. So we're going to latch that over the back and roll it around a little bit so it's in pretty much the right place. A little bit of pressure on the top and a bit of thumb pressure on the back side there, and there we go. That's our cooler installed. All we need to do now is to actually connect up the PWM controller. Now you're probably looking at this thinking, why is there cable ties and stuff? Now this was actually a twin fan model, but sadly one of the fans has actually died, so all I did was just crudely snipped off the cable there. So anyway, it still works very well. The extra fan only drops maybe 1 or 2 degrees, so that's absolutely fine. So that is the cooler installed. We'll just tuck the wire out of the way for now. We'll cable manage that a little bit better later on. There we go. Nice and easy, installed, and didn't cost a great deal of money. So next thing to do is to install our RAM. So in order to do that, we have to open up the 2nd and 4th sockets because this is dual channel, and because of the way that the RAM talks to the processor, it's done in serial. So what we need to do is to open up number 4 and also number 2. Actually, is it serial or is it parallel? I can never remember, but basically kind of like the first one to actually be wired to the actual processor is slot number 2. Then number 4 is on the other channel. And then if you want to add more RAM, then you'd add it into slots 1 and 3. Hopefully that makes some sense. So to install the RAM, look for your notches on the motherboard. You'll see they're slightly offset, and if you look at your RAM stick, you'll notice it is offset as well. So it will physically only fit in one way. Well, technically it will fit in either way, but not particularly nicely. So all we want to do is to line up the RAM with the notches and also the retaining clips. Just get it loosely in there. Make sure the notch is lined up, as we said before, which it appears to be, and then equal pressure on both sides at the same time. and it'll snap into place. Now you can, if you want to, do one side first then the other. I have had problems in the past with RAM chips doing that and not seating properly, so I always say equal pressure both sides, but again, install it how you want. Ultimately, it's your PC, it's your build, it's down to you. So next one, we're going to do the same thing again. Just repeat that. Into the 2 slots, make sure it's lined up. Equal pressure on both sides. And it snaps into place. So there we go. Obviously, if you can do, put your motherboard on something soft or like a carton or something, just to protect it. I haven't done on this because I'm a bad person. But anyway, that's the RAM installed. We're not going to be putting any NVMe drives in the PCI Express bays, M.2 bays, that sort of thing. So yep, that is pretty much it for the motherboard. So let's get on and prep the case. So this is the IONZ Kessho case, and I have made some slight modifications to this, just to make you aware. I'm not going with the standard configuration. What I've done is actually I've removed part of the case, which is what some people would probably call one of the defining features of it, but there is actually an LED strip which goes down in the front here. Long story short, the reason why, something to do with this motherboard and the amount of output it gives actually on the addressable RGB rails, it isn't quite enough to power all the fans and the strip at the same time, and it does some weird thing where one of the fans, the LED would be slightly off, or it would flicker slightly. And after doing some research on it, it appears that it did it on all the fans if I swap them around, etc. So it just seems it's drawing a little bit too much power. So I've taken the strip out of the equation, so we can't use the button on the front anymore to change through the RGB section. It's not a problem because we can use RGB Fusion 2.0 from Gigabyte to control all of the RGB, which I think actually is probably going to be working out better, because quite often someone will press the button on the front, change the LED, but then things like your RGB RAM and any other stuff inside the PC, which is running not on the same system, is going to be out of sync. So I've actually disabled this by taking all that out, and we've now just got the 3 fans and the rear fan all going directly into the motherboard, which actually simplifies wiring as well, made that a little bit easier. So yeah, just thought I would mention that. If I take the back panel off, you can see some of the modifications and some of the wiring that I've done already. It's not overly pretty at the moment, but essentially what we've got is on this rear fan, we've got the 2 cables coming off as you would normally. So we've got our 3-pin 5-volt addressable RGB, and we've got a pass-through, and also we've got the 3-pin for the fan header. So that's going to plug into the chassis fan for the rear, so we've got total control over this fan. And then for the ones on the front, I've gone ahead and cable bunched them all together. Again, they all daisy chain, so we just daisy chain them, and it ends up with one single 5-volt addressable RGB header. So we can plug that straight into the board. Luckily this board's got 2 headers, so we can plug one into the kind of like the top header, one into the back header, absolutely fine. And also I've done the same with the PWM style. Again, it's all daisy chained together, but it just ends in one cable. So that makes that a little bit neater. So that's all the RGB wiring there. Then we've got our main IO bunch here. It just simplifies it quite a lot. The extra wiring involved with that front piece was, yeah, a bit of a pain in the backside. It did illuminate it a little bit more, but I think we've got enough lighting in here, so it should be absolutely fine. I have done some kind of test runs to see what it looks like. Yeah, still looks very good, and still has that 3-dimensional look on the front, which is what we're aiming for. So anyway, that is the case prep. Other than that, also the power supply, we've modified the power supply slightly by putting some of that carbon fiber wrap on it, just to cover up some of the slightly more ugly lines on the side, the Cylon logo and that orange tab. Although in hindsight now, it would have possibly been something to keep. We could go with Gigabyte's theme color, which is orange, and then we've got the orange highlights on the power supply. Again, my taste might not be the same as everybody else's, so I figured if I blank it out, at least that way the next owner of this can actually do what they like, and it's not going to stand out like a sore thumb, and it makes the bottom look a little bit better. So speaking of which, let's install the power supply first of all. Now before I actually put this in the PC, I have noticed that there is a little bit of a close tolerance here. So I'm actually going to stick through some of the cables which are required. So we've got our HD audio, which is towards the back. I think that's the that's the USB. So I'm going to pop that one through, and also HD audio, which is this one down here. So I'm going to put that through in approximately the right place. And actually I'm going to put through the addressable RGB cable as well, because that does need to go through, and it's a little bit tight to do otherwise with the power supply in the way. And I think that is going to be pretty much it for this area. So when I put the power supply in, it's going to go underneath and it won't damage the wires at all. So power supply wise, we're going to go with this one being, as the fan is there, as quite a large fan on there. We do have ventilation on the bottom, so I'm going to actually stick it in that way. You could, if you wanted to, because this case does actually have some pretty decent ventilation on that top section, you could face it either way, but for me in this particular instance, I'm going to do it face down, and also because we've got our carbon fibre on that side. Otherwise I'd have to do that side, or maybe not, because it is plain anyway. So yeah, down to the individual, but I'm going to actually go ahead and put this one in face down. I've already connected up the required cables I need on the modular system, and also we've got our graphics card connection there for our GPU. So all we need to do is just slide this in. I'm going to hold the wires up just slightly while I put it in the first part, and gently slide it round, line it up on the back, and then we can go ahead and put our screws in. Putting the screws in the power supply is pretty straightforward, and you should find it pretty much lines up anyway. Just put the screws in just very lightly, and that will kind of centralize it onto those screws. Although it appears I've actually lined it up pretty well first time, not bad. I would do the bottom ones first, tighten those up a little bit, then do opposing side, and then do the rest of them, and that is it. We're done. So the next part is we're going to install the SSD. Now you don't have to do it in this particular order, but for me it's probably going to be easier. So I've moved some of the cables out of the way just to make a bit more moving access room, that kind of stuff. This is the TCsunbow 1TB. Actually, this drive at the time of purchase was a particularly good deal. I think this was actually possibly Black Friday. I'm not entirely sure. It was a little while back, but certainly was a deal at the time. I think we paid about £60. If you were to buy one of these now, or a similar type of drive, realistically you'd be looking at something like possibly the A400 series from Kingston. They tend to be around about the sort of £75 to £80 mark at the moment. So we have experienced some price increases. So again, this is going to affect the pricing towards the end, but again, I'll go on kind of what I've paid, but I might actually put what you would pay now, just to give you some idea of the differences, even between now and the end of me editing this video, which it will probably change again. But anyway, I digress. So let's take the drive cage out, which is really super easy to do on this. All you need to do is just pull it back a little bit and lift up. And it's actually on rubberized grommets, so if you wanted to put a 3.5-inch drive in here, can do very, very easily, and the rubber on there should dampen some of the rotational noises. Fortunately, we're using a completely static drive, no moving parts whatsoever, so all we need to do is to attach it to the top there, and again, there's no vibrations to go through, so it's absolutely fine. This is really easy to do. Just line it up on the bottom, and there's 4 screw holes using those kind of same screws as used for motherboards, etc., and we can just attach that in very easily, making sure that actually the drive, the connections are towards the back where it says HDD SSD. So yeah, just line those up, put your screws in, and then we can put the drive back in. When you finish installing the drive, I haven't shown you the screws because it's very boring. You should notice that the tags at the bottom there are slightly over the edge, and you've got the 4 screws in there. So once that's done, all you need to do is to line up the drive again. There is actually 2 mounting areas for the drive. You can either have it towards the front or towards the back. I'm actually going to go towards the front slightly on this one. Just push towards the front and it locks into place on those rubber grommets. So that's the drive installed. Next thing, I suppose we should put the motherboard in. So we're going to put the board in now. So some things which I've done just to make life a bit easier. So I've taken the IO cables from here and just tuck them in right there so that it's easier so they don't snag when we're actually trying to put the board in. That's always a good idea to do. And look out for things at the top there. So we've got our fan cables. Just make sure you push those up a little bit so they don't get caught in when you're putting the IO shield in. Now this board's only got 6 mounting pillars, so we're using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. There is a mounting port on the board which could kind of go here, but there's no cutout for it, so we're going to omit that one. So please don't tell me in the comments that I've forgotten a mounting pillar. I haven't forgotten, I just can't put it in there. So all we need to do is to get the board itself and gently lower it in, trying to avoid those cables which I've said to move out the way, and then we should be alright. I might have to tuck that underneath there. It's a bit hard to do one-handed, so I've moved the cables a little bit more and just line it up, and actually I think that's gone in. Just make sure that all the holes are mounted in the right places. Looks pretty good to me. Just double check that the cables coming out of the fan aren't getting snagged. You can, if you want to, remove the fan. It might make it easier for some of you out there who are a little bit more novice to this, or just having issues getting it to line up. So that is pretty much the board in, just need to put the screws in and that part is done. Okay, so now we've got the motherboard installed, now is, well, some people would prefer now to do some of the cable management tasks. Again, it's down to the individual. I think I'm going to go ahead and sort of get some of the cables lined up already, just to try and make this a little bit easier for myself. So the first one is going to be our EPS connector, that's our 4+4 connector, which goes in through this top section. So I'm just going to pass that through out the top at the moment and try and get it as flat as possible, because this is kind of like those licorice cables. So try and take any twists out of it. That's going to make cable management a little bit easier as we go forward a little bit later on. Also, we've got our 24-pin connector, which is our main power for the motherboard. So we can pass that one through. I think that was going to go through about here. Yep, that lines up pretty well. So we can put that one kind of in place there. Next is going to be our graphics card power, which is the 6+2 pin. This one's actually got a kind of like a spur or daisy chain coming off it. So if you've got a card with two connectors on, then you can connect up both. I've cable tied it back so that when it comes in, it looks a little bit neater. So I'm going to pass that one through. There is actually a hole in the bottom of this basement for graphics card cables to come through. So that's nice and easy to do. We can just pass that through. I'm actually going to pull this cable all the way through as far as I possibly can, and then we can tuck that back in a little bit later on. So the only thing left is our SATA connection, which is again very straightforward. All it needs to do is to stretch from there into there. So we're going to have a bunch of cabling extra. What I'm going to probably do is, I think I might leave an extra SATA on the end. So if I go for the middle one of the three, we'll plug that into the drive and then we can tuck the rest of the cables actually inside. Or if we wanted to, for a little bit of a neater job, we could use the first one because of the way that the dog leg is on the SATA connection. So if we plug that in now, I'll show you what I mean. So that's with it connected, so we can just tuck this cable back in underneath into the basement because we no longer need that. So just get that out of the way. And then the rest of this we can just bunch up a little bit. And again, just tuck all that underneath in our little drive caddy. So there, actually pretty neat. So with the bulk of the cabling done, I can probably pass through some of these now because we know where these are going to go to. So we've got our 5-volt addressable RGB. I believe this one goes towards the top of the board. I'm just going to have to look now. Yeah, this one goes towards the top, and there is a fan header as well. So I'm going to try and aim both of these to go towards the top. And looking through, there isn't really an ideal place for them to go. So I think I'm probably going to take them maybe through this hole. Yeah, there isn't a particularly neat way of doing it, so I think I'm just going to take them through there. Pull them pretty much most of the way through, and then we can sort out the cabling after. We've also got the cable for our PWM connection for the fan, which actually I might take back through and just try and tuck that away inside. We've got our RGB cable, which is running through there, which is absolutely fine. And yeah, I think that is it for the rear for now. We can get everything else connected on the inside, and then we can go ahead and put our graphics card in. So looking on this side now, it's a little bit of a mess, but we've got quite a lot going on here. Isn't a problem, we can manage it. It's just going through it methodically and trying to make sure the cables are all in the right places. So for me, I would say probably the best thing to do next is your front panel IO connector. Those tend to be really fiddly. I wish somebody would do some kind of device or something easy which you can just get to plug those into, which makes it a simpler thing to do. They are pretty much all universal, they all work essentially the same way. I am actually tempted to get an old USB 2.0 plug and see if I can repurpose it and actually take these out and put it into there so I can just plug in one at one time. Would make life considerably easier. So I'm going to go ahead and put these cables in. I'll put on the screen now the actual layout for the pin outputs. On pretty much all cases, it is universal essentially. Some may be slightly different, but the process for things like the reset switch, power switch, hard drive LED, power LED, etc. are all pretty much identical. So I'll put that on screen now and you can check it out for yourselves. And I'm going to try and attempt to plug these in the first time. Okay, so there we go. We'll finish off the cabling. We've done a little bit of a tidy up as well, and hopefully you'll agree with me that it looks considerably neater. So at the bottom we've got all of our I/O connections, USB, etc, etc. We've also got our top EPS connector, and if we spin this round you can see that we've done a pretty tidy job of things and managed to get most of it actually tucked away pretty nicely. So the only thing which really is a little bit of an annoyance is that EPS connector there going across on that kind of weird angle, but it's only as long as it can be, so that is one of the downsides of this particular power supply. The cable is a little bit on the short side, so it is kind of stretched across there. Not really much else we could have done. Maybe could have run it up and then across, but yeah, anyway. So we've got our CPU connection, the PWM tucked away there, got our RGB and PWM for the front fans going down through there. We've got our main section here, which is the USB and front IO, etc. And then we've got our power cable going up through there. And we've still got some pretty decent access into the bay at the bottom here, so if we want to add another drive, we can do very easily. Yeah, I think it's turned out very nicely. And a few other things were left. There is a pass-through connection there at the bottom for the 5-volt addressable RGB, which is the spur off of the fan. So if we want to add something at a later date, then it's easily accessible and not all tucked away. But yeah, overall I think it's actually worked out pretty well. The only thing we need to do now is to install the 2 additional components to finalize this. One of which is the Wi-Fi card, which we'll go ahead and stick in now, and also the graphics card, and then we can fire it up and make sure that everything is as it should be. So we'll start off with the Wi-Fi card first of all. This is the UBIT. This is the 1167 megabits per second card, which is kind of lies. That's a combination, but yeah, it's a pretty decent Wi-Fi card. It does have a USB spur cable coming off it for the Bluetooth side of things. So the Wi-Fi runs off the PCI Express, and the Bluetooth runs off USB. So yeah, pretty straightforward thing to do. Literally all we need to do is to find a suitable slot, which is going to be the PCI Express here at the very bottom, and we've got a USB connection just there. So I think it's probably going to be a good idea to plug in the USB first of all, because that might be a little bit more tricky to get to once the card's actually in place. So there's that plugged in. Okay, very simple. I would have liked for this to have been black really, but once it's actually installed, it probably won't be that noticeable from the side when we've got the glass on, etc. But yeah, I think green BCB has probably had its day by now. So anyway, I'm going to stick this in and then we can put the graphics card in. So now all we need to do is put in the graphics card. So I've removed the 2 blanking plates there. I think I did that before actually, but anyway, they're out. So make sure you have the one which is lined up with your graphics card slot and the one below, or maybe a third one if you've got a particularly large card. And on the slot for the GPU, just make sure the retention clip is in the down position or back. Line up the graphics card with the slot and push both sides and it locks into position, and then you can get your 2 screws, and I would lift the graphics card up a little bit, do the middle one first or the bottom one, and once it's in place then you can put the top one in as well. You can if you want to be really, really anal about it, get yourself a little measuring level on the top of the graphics card just to make sure that it's flat. I think that is pretty much as flat as it can be. All we need to do now is to plug in the cable for the power. So this is the long power cable. And again, I've pulled the whole cable through. I'm going to use all of our 8-pin connector, and this one just plugs into the end there and snaps into place. Once we've done that, then we can tuck away the rest of the cable that we're not needed or not using back through that hole at the front there and bend it around, and yeah, that looks pretty clean. Shame the hole wasn't a little bit further forward really to give the slightly straighter line on it. Maybe I'm being a little bit pedantic there. Sadly, it can't go through there because that would have given it a really bizarre angle, but that's absolutely fine. So all we need to do now is to connect everything up and make sure it all works. Okay, so we're back and it's all done and dusted. We've done our benchmarks, done the testing, stability tests, etc, etc, etc. Even made a note of how much everything cost, because I am somewhat professional in that regard. Anyway, moving on. So as you can see, the PC is done and I think it looks really, really nice. This IONZ Kessho, I want to say Kesno for some reason, I don't know why. Kessho case, I think it looks the bees, it really does. And like I said in the intro, I've taken out the strip which is in the front there because I don't think it really needed it. It overpowered it slightly, actually in more ways than one. It gave it too much light at front, and also the RGB headers just, for some reason, just did not like it. So anyway, we've gone with this, simplified it totally, and it's all nicely wired up, and I think it looks absolutely brilliant. It really does. And we've got a lot of RGB going on here. We've got a lot of extra room as well, as you can probably see. So RGB wise, we've got obviously RGB at the back, we've got RGB on the RAM, as you can probably make out, RGB on the fans at the front, we've got RGB on the chipset at the bottom there. Yeah, there's a lot of lighting going on here, there really is. Well, I think it looks, yeah, really good. Performance wise, done really well. We did our usual kind of run through of various things. So we've got CSGO, which you'll probably be seeing on the screen right now. That played absolutely brilliantly. CSGO is one of those weird titles where you do get some fluctuations in frame rates, although we were seeing kind of error between 130 frames per second is probably one of the minimums, and anything up to around about 260, 270, possibly even hitting towards the 300 in some places. Now this was with everything on high settings, 1080p and uncapped, so just let it do what it wanted to do. So for instance, with this PC, I think it's going to be very easy. If you get yourself a 144Hz monitor or maybe a 165Hz monitor, yeah, you're going to have no issues whatsoever with the V-Sync, G-Sync, whatever, working together. You're going to get some really nice buttery gameplay. As you can see from the footage, it played really well. I particularly didn't, but the footage itself is really good. Then we moved on to my favourite, which is Rocket League. So we had a bit of a blast on Rocket League, and again, similar sort of story. We're getting some dips here and there, but in general, we're looking around about the sort of 250 to 300 frames per second, which realistically, I would probably frame cap it to 165, use a 165Hz or 144Hz monitor, maybe cap it down to 140, and just to keep the temperatures in check a little bit. Although saying that, temperatures on this were absolutely great, so there's no issues there. And Rocket League played really well, and I even scored a goal and won the match, so yes, very good. Happy days with that, enjoyed it immensely. So those are two esports titles, so we need something to really push this a little bit more to see how well it does. So then we moved on to Wreckfest, which again is another favourite. Wreckfest, a little bit more demanding, a lot more physics going on, and the actual graphics engine is more detailed, so played some of that and actually managed to win that as well. Again, frame rate wise, we're getting some dips here and there, but mostly we're around about the sort of 140, 150, which actually for 1080p gaming with pretty much high settings, I think that's a really great number. That is what feels good for me. Again, if you want to go for that 144Hz monitor, you're going to be in that sweet spot, and using V-Sync, that kind of stuff, it's going to keep it all looking very nice and slippery smooth. Really good game, looked fantastic, played very well, and the system really barely broke a sweat. Kept the temperatures under control, and after playing some of the games, went back, had a look in hardware monitor, see where we're at, and the processor itself didn't really get much above around about 60 degrees under gaming conditions. I think it was about 60, 63. You'll probably see it on screen anyway. And the GPU, similar sort of deal, a little bit higher in the kind of 67 degrees mark. The hotspot on the CPU, they do measure it differently nowadays, so you get your GPU temperature and then you get your hotspot, so the hottest part of the graphics card. So I think we were around about 67 degrees as the overall temperature, and somewhere in the mid 70s for the hotspot, which again is absolutely fine for this type of card. Airflow wise, I think we've done really well. There's not a lot of noise actually comes from these fans, and they're not particularly fast spinning fans, so even when the system's absolutely flat out, and I did set the curve so that it's 60 degrees or more, all the fans are at full speed. That is the cooler and the front and rear fans. And even so, you barely hear a difference. It is pretty much whisper quiet. And as you see, I'm right next to it now. I've got my lav mic on, so any noises there you can pick up. In fact, probably the noisiest thing I can hear in there at the moment, there's a very kind of odd resonance coming from the power supply fan. It's a slightly cheaper power supply, as we know. This is Aerocool Cylon, so yeah, it's not the cream of the crop, but yeah, it's one of those things which we put up with because we saved a load of money. And saved a load of money we did. So let's take a look at the pricing, as I discussed earlier. Now, this is going to go on prices that I've paid, so what is available on the market may not be always the same. This is going to be primarily down to hard drive prices going up, RAM prices going up, GPUs being virtually unobtainium, and CPUs, yeah, getting a little bit more expensive as they go. So CPU wise, Ryzen 7 1700X, that was £130, at least that's what we put it in for. You can go to CEX. Most of the stuff I'm going to say now is either from CEX, Facebook Marketplace, or brand new on Amazon. That's where I got the prices from. Also a little bit of eBay thrown in there for good measure. So prices are kind of averaged out. So yeah, CPU 130, the case, the Kessho, you're looking on eBay at the moment, including postage, £45, which again, I think is great. The case probably is the selling point of this entire build, to be honest with you. The cooler, which is the MT-4 from Snowman, that's £20, give or take. That one, you may have to shop around a little bit more. Probably AliExpress, that kind of thing is probably your best bet. Slower postage, but you're going to get it cheaper. RAM, that's the XPG Spectrix DDR4 3200. That we picked up for £50, but I have had a look around. You can get Corsair DDR4 3200, even 3600 in some places for around about £50, maybe £60 for the 3600 speed. But for this processor, 3200 is the kind of sweet spot. So yeah, £50 to £60 is pretty much where you're going to be looking for that. Motherboard, yeah, deal of the century, £33, absolutely spectacular, can't go wrong with that. You will pay more. Realistically, if you allocate kind of £60 to a board, you should be able to pick up a decent deal. You can get the actual same board in here, brand new, from Amazon, from around about 60, so that is where I've got the price for that, but we paid 33. The GPU, we got a pretty good deal for the GTX 1070 SC from EVGA, 225 we paid for that. There still are some out there. You have to look, but they are out there. Realistically, you may pay a little bit more, so 250 or so, but they are available if you look on the used market. PSU, £25, give or take, so that was the Cylon. Wi-Fi card, which we've added in, which wasn't on the kind of original spec. That's an additional £20 for the UBIT card. Windows and Office, we're looking at £20 for that from premiumcdkeys.com/Mike's Unboxing. Even with discount, rings out about £17, I think, after both are taken into account. So that's Windows 10 and also Office 2019 Professional Plus, which obviously if you don't want either of those, you can run it unactivated, which I did in this particular instance. I haven't bought the licenses yet. So you can take maybe £20 off the price to bring it down a little bit if you wanted to. SSD is the one thing which, again, prices have changed a little bit. £60 for the TCsunbow drive. Realistically now you can probably add about another £20 onto that, maybe 80. You might get lucky and get a deal. I would strongly advise not buying a used or refurbished SSD if you can possibly help it. Some companies, I think it was possibly Crucial at one point, were doing refurb drives, absolutely fine. But if you're going to somewhere like CEX, eBay, buying from Facebook, unless it is an absolute steal, don't get a used SSD, because especially when people have been mining on them and sort of things with Chia and that kind of stuff, you never know. If you are going to do it, do some sort of drive health checks to make sure it's okay, make sure there's no sort of bad sectors or worn out RAM on the drive itself. I would go new. Wherever possible, go new. Anyway, that is my opinion. So overall, we're looking around about 630 all in, and I think it's done pretty well. We've upgraded the case. We've got a little bit more airflow potentially, and a little bit more control than what it was with the IONZ Taiyo, which we had previously with those whopping great fans on the front. So yeah, we've changed things around a little bit. We've added the Wi-Fi card, which again is going to add a little bit to the build. The last one we put up has been around about 600, well, between 550 and 650, depending where you're buying and stuff. So this one is kind of in that same ballpark, slightly higher because of some of the choices we've made. But overall, I think it's a great build. And essentially what it's going to come down to is the gameplay. For gameplay, this is going to be absolutely fine. No problems at all. For gaming and streaming at the same time, it's going to be a lot easier to do it with a Ryzen 7 1700X than it is with something like maybe a 2600 or maybe one of the 4-core 8-thread versions. You've got a little bit of extra grunt there, so do you want to do a little bit in the background? Do you have lots of other things going on? So you've got your various game launchers, maybe umpteen browsers, Discord, which obviously you're free to join our Discord, and all those kinds of things that all mounts up and all takes processing power. So I think the 1700X is one of those kind of underrated CPUs at the moment. Potentially if you wanted to spend a little bit more, maybe an extra £10–15 and go for the 2700X, which again is the next class above in terms of performance, it's not really going to affect your gameplay a great deal. Maybe very slightly, but it is a slightly newer architecture. Maybe you can get it to run with slightly faster RAM, and it has got better instructions per clock. So you're going to get a few more FPS from every megahertz, in theory. Anyway, that is going to pretty much wrap this one up. Hopefully you've enjoyed this, going through the motions with me. It was a real shame that the first build had that dodgy board, which is actually still waiting to go back. It's on the sofa in the other room. We really must do that. But back to this one. Yeah, I think the IONZ Kessho, however you want to pronounce it, I think it's a really nice looking case. If you are interested in doing a build on it, I would highly recommend it. There's no real gotchas. The RGB setup is a little bit complicated. That is the one thing that I would say is kind of like, I wish it could be easier, but it's extremely cheap. There's very few cases. I think the closest you can come to this with 3 addressable RGB fans with actual control on them as well is probably about £60. So we're saving about £15, which potentially could be the difference between you getting a 1700X or a 2700X, that kind of thing. So it's always swings and roundabouts with building a PC. Ideally, it's about balance. You don't need to spend £100 on a case to put all your components in. Pretty much any case will do, as long as it's got a bit of airflow. Components are the things you want to be actually concentrating on. Who cares if it looks nice, but if it does, then it's certainly a bonus. So anyway, I've waffled on for way too long. Thank you for getting to the very end of the video, and for those of you that got to the end of the video, we are very thankful, as we are to all of our subscribers, viewers, and also now our members. So if you want to join the Mike's Unboxing crew and be one of our members, you can get membership $2.99 and you get extra perks such as emojis, and you get badges and also priority videos. So if you want to get videos ahead of the curve, then you're more than welcome to do that. We're only doing it because it pleases the YouTube algorithm. Yes, YouTube does like us to add membership. It does appear to improve the viewer figures. So hey, what can you do? So if you want to join, feel free to do so, but you don't actually lose out on any content. All content that we make will be on the YouTube channel in the main form, free of charge for everybody as per usual. So you're not losing out, but if you want to help out, feel free to do so. So I've been Mike, this is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we will catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.